Hi, everyone. I'm here to welcome you guys to a FLIRT presentation today. So FLIRT stands for Friday Light Informal Research Talks, and they're an opportunity for Grenfell researchers and partners to share their work with others. We're really excited that we're doing an online version of that this year. And today we have a presentation brought to you by Jackie Bauman, who is a Master's of Arts and Environmental Policy graduate student, and Rebecca Brushett, who is the Executive Director of Atlantic Healthy Oceans Initiative. So Jackie is a current student with the Environmental Policy Institute at Grenfell campus. She graduated from the University of Guelph with a BA in Environmental Governance, where she developed her interest in resource-dependent communities, sustainable livelihoods, and biodiversity conservation. Her research interests at Grenfell have centered around coastal communities in Newfoundland that have taken an active role in governing marine resources and conserving the health of marine ecosystems. She loves being by the ocean and is passionate about stewardship for the Gulf of St. Lawrence. Her favorite part of being in Gros Morne is watching the waves and being able to spot so many different birds, whales, and other marine lives. What makes the area the most special is recognizing how connected communities are to the ocean and appreciating how resilient the way of life is here. So thank you so much, Jackie, for being here. And she is joined by Rebecca Brushett, who I mentioned earlier is the Executive Director of Atlantic Healthy Oceans Initiative. So a little bit about Rebecca. Shortly after high school in her hometown at Marystown, Newfoundland, Rebecca set her eyes on Halifax to complete her BSc in Marine Biology at Dalhousie. Now, almost 15 years later, she has been awarded a Bachelor's of Education in Secondary Education from Memorial University and a Master of Arts in Environmental Policy from Grenfell campus for her work on marine spatial planning for the Gros Morne region. Throughout this time, she also gained years of experience studying gray whales, zooplankton, and redfish off Vancouver Island, worked at the Ocean Science Center in St. John's to better understand the productive waters of Bond Bay in Gros Morne, taught as a high school science teacher as far north as St. Anthony, and throughout every community of Gros Morne, held a seat at the Ocean Summit during the G7 in Halifax to discuss ways to reduce plastic impacts to our marine environment globally, and now working again in Western Newfoundland to make the Gros Morne region plastic waste free. Although her home base is in Norris Point, she also works remotely for the Ecology Action Center as their sustainable fisheries coordinator to help promote healthy commercial fisheries within the Gulf of St. Lawrence, and as their marine planner for Gros Morne, will be working with the communities to create a sustainable marine plan for the region that looks after the people and the long-term health of our oceans together. In March of 2019, Rebecca created Ahoy, the Atlantic Healthy Oceans Initiative. I love the Ahoy acronym because she felt there was a gap that not only promotes and builds prosperous coastal communities, but also respects and looks after the health of our coastal and marine ecosystems surrounding the Gros Morne region. So I'm going to get Rebecca and Jackie to share their videos and unmute, and Rebecca can share her presentation, and I'll get them to start going. So thank you guys so much for being here today with us. And if you have any questions, please put those in the chat box and or in the comment section, and we'll get to those after the presentation. So thank you guys so much.
Thank you. All right, I'm just going to get this started. Okay, here we go. I'm just going to fix the settings. All right. Can everybody see that? Okay. Oh, we're at the end. You can't start at the end. Let's go to the beginning. There we go. Okay. Swap. How does that look for everyone out there? If someone could let me know, that would be awesome.
Looks good.
Looks good.
Okay, great. All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Rebecca. I'm the Executive Director of Ahoy, and I'm here to tell you about how we're hoping to make Gros Morne region plastic waste free. And we have Jackie, who can introduce herself.
Hello. Thank you, Jen, for the lovely introduction. And so I'm going to be talking about how I got involved with the Atlantic Healthy Oceans Initiative this summer. And yeah, we're really excited to share with you what we've been up to.
Awesome. All right, so we'll just get started into this. Here we go. All right. So before we jump right into the big pieces of this, I'll give you a quick overview of what we're going to touch on. We'll talk about who Atlantic Healthy Oceans is, this plastics program, and how we're going to try and reduce the plastic pollution in the Gros Morne region. We're going to talk about why we're even talking about plastics, especially for Western Newfoundland, how anybody out there can get involved, and of course, how Jackie was involved with us this summer. We'll talk about the timeline that this project hopes to do and beyond, and then, of course, leave some time for questions. So, who is Ahoy? Well, Ahoy is a nonprofit. It was created by me in 2019. Like Jennifer said in my biography, I just see a missing gap and thought that it would be great to not only create a program that will bring awareness of our changing oceans to the region, but facilitate some form of action to protect it and the people that depend on it most. Because, you know, we have so many people here that love the ocean. Why not have an opportunity to create stewards for the sea and look after our fisheries and our coastal communities all at the same time? So some overarching goals and objectives that Ahoy hopes to work on and is working on somewhat is to develop educational programs. So again, with my background in education, I'm able to do this and work with others in the region to create more educational programs on the importance of our oceans. Some other things would be to implement conservation projects, uphold environmental protection laws. So, you know, if there's something going on off Western Newfoundland, throughout Newfoundland, as well as into the Gulf of St. Lawrence, that's our focus areas. And if we see something that, you know, maybe happening out there that's not very responsible or not looking after, you know, the people that depend on the oceans most, as well as the oceans, we're here to help try and fix that. And lastly, and probably the reason why we're here today is to talk about, you know, ways to conduct research, not only as ourselves, but to also work with universities, communities, councils, everybody to spread awareness and work towards a more sustainable region. So some main areas of interest topic-wise, obviously we're looking at plastic pollution, again, why we're here today. But some other ones that we're interested in and will work on over the coming years is the reduction of high-impact overfishing, especially again for this area. Look at climate change and how that's affecting the marine biodiversity in the oceans that are around Gros Morne, Western Newfoundland, but also how they're impacting our coasts, erosion, there's bigger storms, and how they're affecting our communities as well. So all those things kind of are, you know, it works together, and we want to look at how we can fix those things and be prepared with the changing climates. We're also interested in looking at marine conservation and protection. So, you know, looking at what's going on in the ocean, how we need to look after sensitive marine habitats and so on. And then lastly, keeping an eye on impacts from offshore oil and gas exploration and drilling, especially as it relates to around the Gulf of St. Lawrence, and, you know, how that may impact, you know, this national park, Gros Morne region, and any community really up the coast of Western Newfoundland. So the plastics project, why we're here, how are we going to reduce the plastics pollution in Gros Morne National Park and the region itself? So before we got funding, which I can announce because we found out 2 days ago that the federal government has actually awarded us funding to hopefully create a successful project that will help reduce our plastic waste for the region. And right here is the main title and topic and focus area for this project to start, which is to target plastic leakage points and problematic commonly littered items to decrease the release of plastic waste and pollution. And, you know, we have some amazing partnerships. One, obviously, Grenfell campus and the Environmental Policy Institute with Jackie and future interns, summer students, research assistantships. We're also really excited to have partnered with Gros Morne Cooperating Association, which is a longtime nonprofit here in Gros Morne National Park in the region. We're lucky enough to have Tour Gros Morne, a tourism operator interested in helping work on this project, and some really great letters of support from the towns of Norris Point, town of Trout River, and as well town of Rocky Harbour. Since we put in the application, we also have some really great letters of support from Parks Canada and even Cowhead community. So really awesome first steps forward, and we're excited to work with all of these people, but we're not stuck on just these groups. We're interested in working with anybody, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. So the plastics issue, why are we even here? Why are we talking about plastics? And, you know, just actually to go back to this, we do recognize that there's a lot of issues with different sectors. And for this project, we're actually focusing on the tourism sector. And I'll talk a little bit about that as well later. Plastics issue. So the big one, and, you know, a quick science lesson. We won't get into it too much, but for those of you that don't already know, there is currents or systems that go on in our oceans. And I'm only showing you 2 pictures here right now, but there's actually 5 ocean gyres in the world. And as you can see here in the presentation, we can see that little blurb here in the green, that's Newfoundland. And then of course the water body on the west is the Gulf of St. Lawrence. So some people may say, well, you know, I don't have that much garbage, or they'll say, well, how does me in central Newfoundland throwing, you know, a Tim Hortons coffee cup out the window have anything to do with the oceans? Well, there's river systems, there's storms, there's wind, there's everything that carries not only litter, but garbage from landfills to the rivers, to the ocean systems that then end up in the larger parts of the ocean. And these systems, or gyres, move with the temperature. So just like the air, hot air rises, if you're ever at the cabin with a nice toasty wood stove, you know that if you go upstairs, you're sweating, and then it's colder on the bottom. So this causes a circulation of air, but the same kind of concept happens in the ocean, bringing hot air from the Gulf and down in the South Atlantic, up to the North Atlantic, cold water sinks, causes it to move, and it also happens with the winds. And all these different systems are actually taking small pieces of plastic garbage, big pieces of garbage, plastic pollution that's been broken off from storms, whether it be cod, you know, cod trawl ropes, crab traps, lobster traps, fishing rope, all this stuff. If anything gets broken in the Gulf, it then ends up getting pushed out to these circulation gyres. And as they're moving and reacting with the sun, these big, larger pieces of plastic keep breaking down, breaking down, breaking down. And it's estimated that there's roughly around 250,000 tons of floating plastic in the ocean, but 5 to 50 trillion pieces of plastic particles, which you can see here, and is what we're picking up on the beaches and the coasts around Gros Morne and, you know, throughout all the oceans from coast to coast to coast across Canada. So we really felt that, you know, as a coastal community, a coastal nonprofit, that this was part of our responsibility to try and reduce, so it doesn't end up into the ocean affecting animals and, yes, affect us. So biomagnification, bioaccumulations, really big mouthfuls. And what they essentially mean is things that happen in the smaller part of the food chain from our zooplankton, phytoplankton, get eaten by fish, bigger fish, whales, and then sometimes us. So the best way to explain this and why it has anything to do with plastic is that plastic is a magnet for chemicals. So when we grew up, you know, you probably heard the saying, don't eat too much tuna, there's mercury in it. That mercury has been traveled up the food chain to make it dangerous to us if we eat large amounts of tuna. So similar to that, small animals, because this plastic, and you can see in this picture, there's so many different sizes, but there's tiny microplastics that end up being eaten by zooplankton because they think it's actually phytoplankton, or a fish might think, you know, a little plastic nurdle is actually a crab larvae. And they're eating that instead of what they're supposed to be eating. So one, they're malnourished, sometimes starving, and then there's chemicals on those plastics that are going up the food chain. So we may not necessarily eat the plastic that they're eating, but the chemicals that are on those plastics are getting put into the flesh of the fish, which we enjoy. On another side of things, we have filter feeders like mussels, like scallops, like oysters, like clams, that clean the ocean. By doing this, they're actually taking out small plastic microfibers, which is good for the ocean. But if you're a lover of mussels, you're actually eating the entire animal, which means that you're actually eating between 20 and 25 microplastic fibers in a bowl serving of mussels. So you're actually directly eating this. And again, why is this an issue? Well, it's already been determined that plastics are endocrine disruptors. So another big word, which essentially means that you are, your hormones can be impacted, your sinuses, your being able to recover from a flu. All these things are impacted from long-term ingestion of not only the chemicals, but the plastics. So there's big issues, not only for the ocean, because they're ingesting the plastics and then we're ingesting the fish and essentially the chemicals and sometimes the actual microfibers. But the animals are also getting entangled. They're dying. There's marine mammals that are getting straws in their nose, like turtles. There's seals that are completely entangled. There's endangered whales now, like right whales, that are getting completely entangled and drowning because they can't get to the surface because, you know, the ocean litter and debris from plastics is just too much. So here we are trying to make a difference. It's a small piece, but we got to start somewhere. So that's kind of the issue. You know, and so ways to tackle that, one is what's called extended producer responsibility. And this is a program that can be implemented by municipality. It can be implemented by a province, a country, any type of government or a decision maker that can, you know, help change communities and provinces and countries. So what it is, it takes the onus of dealing with the plastic or the packaging off me and you and puts it on to the person that's producing the packaging. So for an example, if I went to a grocery store and I wanted to get chicken, I don't want, you know, the plastic wrap and the styrofoam. I want the chicken. But in order to get the chicken from the grocery store, I have to take the rest of it with it. So if there is an EPR or extended producer responsibility program implemented, say in our region, it would make the person that's, you know, producing the chicken, so maybe the farmer who's packaging the chicken, and there would be rules to implement that would make them responsible for the end of that packaging. So they would have to then decide, is it going to be biodegradable? Is it going to be reusable? Is it recyclable plastic, or is it straight up waste that's going to a landfill and possibly into the oceans? So, and if it is something that would go into the landfill or not responsibly have the that not, here we go, tongue-tied. But if it's not able to be disposed of responsibly, then there becomes a fine for that producer of that packaging. So the purpose, I guess, is to make the producers more aware of and give them some pressure to be more responsible. And that, in doing so, would hopefully, in theory, push producers of different types of products that have to be packaged towards something that's more circular. So a circular economy essentially means that's closed loop. So instead of just focusing on recyclable and biodegradable, it's, you know, in hopes that they'll look at other alternatives that are reusable, refillable. So it's completely closed loop, and that's the end goal. But, you know, it's baby steps and, you know, working with what we can at the moment. There is some really great documentaries out there, like The Story of Plastic that's here. And, you know, they really talk about how to refuse first. So as customers that want that chicken, that maybe want to go to a takeout restaurant, you can, as a customer, refuse that straw, that packaging, and you can ask for something else, something that might be recyclable, or maybe you bring your own straw or your reusable coffee container. And that's ways to help not only, you know, focus on recycling, but to get rid of waste in the first place. Because the other big issue is that most of the plastic that we're using, it might say it's recyclable, but it has to be recyclable in the areas that our garbage and our plastic and our recyclables are actually getting shipped. So 2% of what we're actually recycling is only effectively recycled because it, again, depends on where it's going. So in order to actually be recycled in Newfoundland, it does get shipped off the island for those people that don't know. It has to be spotless. It has to be clean. You actually have to wash it out. If there's any type of mold or one thing in a big bag of recyclables, if one thing is moldy, that whole bag goes in a landfill, right? So it's a bit daunting, But that's why it's so important to really pay attention to what you're buying plastic packaging wise, how you're cleaning it. And again, focusing on how you can really just reduce having plastic materials in your house and use more reusable things. Moving towards that circular plastics economy is huge. It's a lot of work, but baby steps. Like, don't stress out about, using everything as reusables or whatnot. But there is some other materials that you can use to substitute for single-use plastics, like I said, your coffee cup, your straws. There's reusable forks, spoons, and knives now. There's reusable bags. Jackie's going to talk a little bit more in a bit on, how we're trying to fix the region. So, moving on from that is, how can you get involved, whether it be in Gros Morne or Western Newfoundland or beyond? We do have some really great partnerships, but there's always opportunity for more. Currently, we work, again, like I said, with local businesses and community members, the university, like Jackie, and she's going to talk here in a minute, so I can take a break. But we're interested in working with, the young kids in the elementary, primary, high school, junior high, working with the town council. So we've already developed some really great relationships, and we're going to work with them to develop programs and policies that can help them encourage their communities to reduce their plastic waste. We will be working with Parks Canada to look at, what's going on in the park with visitation and ways to help reduce the plastic waste and just overall waste, focusing on turning the tap off at the beginning rather than focusing on what's recyclable and not recyclable. I mean, if there's less waste in the garbage, there's less waste anywhere, which also, reduces the waste from possibly getting into our oceans and coasts. And other interested NGOs. So we've already paired up with, before this funding, when we were just doing beach cleanups, we've already paired up with World Wildlife Fund to look at, Great Canadian Shoreline Cleanup and ways to audit beach cleanups. And you can see that in the picture here. We had some volunteers from the Marine Station, which was awesome. In the top picture, we worked with Parlay for the Oceans. And you can see here a truck from Parks Canada. We've worked with DFO. We've also worked with Greenpeace, who has an amazing plastic waste and brand audit. So those relationships have taught us not only that it's important to clean up our coasts, but also how to audit it, how to know then after you audit how much waste, whether it be fishing gear or other types, but also who's the brands. So looking at the names of the producers of this plastic and developing campaigns and programs to try and get them to reduce the style or change the style of what their products are being packaged in. So that's kind of where we're at now. And now I'm going to leave it to Jackie. I hope she had a great summer. We'll let her talk and kind of what she did this summer with us.
Yeah, so you can actually see from this picture, this is the latest beach cleanup that I got involved in with Ahoy, and you can see the volunteers, and you can see Rebecca and myself. We collected lots of trash, and so I'm going to tell you a little bit more about how we dealt with that and what else I got to help contribute. So throughout my internship this summer, I got to do a lot of research. First of all, just researching the impacts of plastic pollution and microplastics and getting a better sense of the current situation in Gros Morne and in Newfoundland as a whole. And so that also involved doing some baseline data collection. And that also links up with some of the beach cleanups, which I'm going to get into a little bit more just in a minute. And then some policy review. So I was looking at other jurisdictions. One really helpful place that I looked was in Nova Scotia. They've got a really great program in place already. So I was looking into some of their policies and some of the programs going on at the local level as well, and looking just across Canada even. And so then that in turn helped me to develop this proposal to ban single-use plastics and reduce local pollution. So you can see this picture here on the left is a report that I developed. And it basically goes over why we want to eliminate plastics, specifically single-use plastics. And then beyond that, like how can we just reduce our plastic pollution in general? And so I was looking to different levels of government in Newfoundland. I was building off of some of my networking from my experience as a master's student with the environmental policy program. So that was really helpful that I could bring in some of my previous knowledge dealing with policy and, looking to the Multi-Materials Stewardship Board, the Western Regional Waste Management. I learned a lot from them. They were super helpful, and that also just provided me with a really great chance to network and learn from these different organizations and levels of government. And then again, just networking with other businesses in the Gros Morne area. So like you saw from the slide earlier on, all of those different partnerships and the different tourism operators, we got to give some really great presentations and to discuss what we hope to accomplish in the region and some of the different programs that we want to see come forward in the coming months and the coming years. And I'll get a little bit more into that after as well. And then finally, just relationship building is another great thing, and having this really great connection with the Atlantic Healthy Oceans Initiative and the local community. It's just really amazing. So you can go back to this next slide here and I'll show you some of the nitty-gritty stuff that I got to be involved in. So this is just a snapshot of the first beach cleanup that we got to do this year. This was actually on World Oceans Day. And so we went to Wild Cove in Norris Point and we collected heaps of garbage. We've got 400 pounds, and this is just in a small section of the beach. It was only about 600 meters, but there was a lot, and we were turning over rocks and just finding so much trash. And so we ended up collecting 31,000 pieces. And we audited all of it. So you can imagine just how much work that was. But it's really important. Rebecca was mentioning about the extender producer responsibility. This is something that helps to make that clear and show how we can make producers more responsible by showing them what the impacts are and where the actual sources of the problem come from. Like by doing these brand audits, we ended up finding out that, Pepsi, Nestle, and Tim Hortons, unsurprisingly, were the big contributors of this waste that we kept finding. So you can see from this pie chart, we have divided up into the main categories of garbage that we found. So the biggest thing was the microplastics. And so, we collected about 20,000 pieces. And so this is an estimate of just all of those little small pieces and the macro plastics even. And although this only weighed about 46 pounds compared to the total, that's still really significant because as Rebecca explained about the way that bioaccumulation works in the food chain and how those tiny bits of plastics continue to break down once they get into the ocean through the sun and different environmental factors, that becomes an even bigger problem and something that we need to be a lot more conscious of. And then some of the other things were, given that there's a big culture of hunting, so we saw lots of shotgun shells, we saw some hygiene products, lots of those, and other plastic pieces. And this can all get traced back to different aspects of tourism, because we know that lots of people come to the Gros Morne area. And so with that comes all sorts of different sources of pollution and bits of garbage. And then another one is fishing and industry. So you can see this photo here. That's all just fishing rope. We saw a lot of that. That made up about 79 pounds. And we found more in other places as well. But what we really want to focus on here is the food takeout and the single-use plastics. So that's that big red square. And so that's pretty significant. That made up, apart from the microplastics and the macroplastics, that's where we found most of the waste. And so that's what Atlantic Healthy Oceans Initiative is trying to tackle first. And so I'm going to move on and tell you about some of the programs that we're getting started to tackle some of these issues. So first of all, we've got these 3 programs that we've introduced to some of the town councils and the tourism operators. And so there's these ideas, they came from learning from the town of Lunenburg and just throughout other research. But so I'll just tell you briefly about the Boomerang Bag, because we didn't get a chance to do so much on that this summer, but we did get to introduce it. And so the Boomerang Bag program, it's basically a way to have a reusable bag and a whole bunch of reusable bags that community members, crafty people who are super into quilting, who have some extra fabric materials, come together, make these bags, and it's a great way to be creative. And then they get left at either bed and breakfasts or grocery stores or gift shops, and basically they just circle around the community. And so it's a really great thing for tourists to enjoy. And so if you use it, and you can just bring it back to the store or wherever you got it from, and then you don't have to carry around a whole bunch of extra bags with you. So yeah, it's a really great program, and we're going to roll that out soon enough. But what we did get to dive right into this summer was the Blue W program and the Sustainable Takeout program. And so first I'm going to tell you about the Blue W program. And so the Blue W program, it's basically this really great idea. It started from this guy in Ottawa, and you can look it up online, but it's essentially this map. And as you can see from this picture here, when you search up your community, you can see all these blue W's, and this signifies where you can find a water refill station. So instead of having plastic water bottles, which should be eliminated everywhere, you can refill your water bottle. It doesn't cost anything. It's fresh water. It's from your local municipality. And so then this is another great way to find out where there can be these water refill stations and where we should have them. And so it's something that we're trying to have in the Gros Morne area, because we want to get Gros Morne on the map with these blue W's. So we, throughout the summer, I got to look on the government website, and I found out the drinking water quality index for each of the communities in Gros Morne. And so the next thing is to find out where we can have these water refill stations. And so, I mean, just by understanding the area, we know that there's schools and different businesses and the park, and there is water refill stations available in these places, but there's definitely some places where there should be some, but there isn't. And so that's one thing that moving forward we're going to work on and continue to monitor the water quality and get this Blue W program in action. And it's also a really great way to bring some more attention to some of the local businesses. So for instance, if you are a tourism operator or a restaurant or something like that, you can get a Blue W sticker to put in your window, and then that shows customers and tourists or community members, whoever, that you can come into their establishment and you can refill your water bottle. And so that's a really great way to bring some more positive sustainability in the area. The next program that we have is the Sustainable Takeout. And so this required a lot of research, but luckily we've got some really great connections with the Gros Morne Cooperating Association. As Rebecca mentioned earlier, they're a very important partner for Ahoy. And so by partnering with them, the idea is that we can have this bulk order of compostable takeout containers. And so I've done some research to find out what are some of the best companies where we can find real compostable, biodegradable products. So you can see here, the Biodegradable Products Institute is a really great source to find these different compostable products. But one thing that was really discouraging was how a lot of these companies claim to have, products that are compostable and biodegradable, but only in an industrial facility. So not necessarily, right? Like a lot of them use plant-based plastic. which is not ideal. So we want to have like the best alternatives, like with the best quality and with the best price. And then with that, we'll be able to store them and supply them to whoever's interested. So we've already reached out to some different tourism operators, and they are really interested. And it also makes a really great difference to say that we've got this grant funding now. And so that's going to really help out with this program and some of the other initiatives. And but on top of that, I mean, we really want to focus on promoting reusables and refillable programs. So the whole thing is that whenever we can't have a reuse refill program in place, we want to make sure that we have the next best alternative, which is through these real compostable products. And so yeah, that's hopefully what we're going to be rolling out soon. We've done some great work, and these are some of the companies here that I've heard a lot of positive feedback from already. So yeah, and then next is our project timeline, I believe, and Rebecca is just going to walk you through that.
Yeah, and I just want to, before I move to, and there's only 2 more slides, so in case anybody's getting tired, I'm talking about plastics. I just want to do a second shout out to Jackie, because she did an incredible amount of work on her internship with the Environmental Policy Institute during her master's program of finding really great products. And we were lucky enough to get a sample box the other day. So I have some to show you. This is the fun part for me anyway. I guess I'm a bit of a geek. But of course, the paper straw, this way, paper straws that everybody's used to seeing. So there's just a sample. But the really cool thing, my favorite one, I guess, is the biodegradable, compostable coffee cup. This is like a cardboard, actual biodegradable, compostable cup, no plastic, which is awesome. And I know some people are like, oh, paper, I can't do that on my mouth. It gets wet and it's gross. Well, that's where reusables come in. You know, if you don't like this, you can use this. So that's why we're looking at the reusable version. Even if you don't want to bring around a container, there can be an option, say, at a coffee shop where, if you want a coffee and they don't offer a takeout container, you can put it in a mason jar, and there can be a little slip cover. So your garbage is really minimum. But some other things that are there, like there's even some soup containers. And again, this company that Jackie found, Eco Bureau, Joseph is great, has a cardboard cover. So there's no plastic cover on this. I'm sure there's some form of a thin film in here. So we are going to do some testing to see how well it does biodegrade in our backyard composts and not requiring a big facility. But anyway, this little guy, your little tartar sauces, your little soup, your little sauces. There's containers for basically everything, and there is an option for biodegradable. We just had to have someone like Jackie to find those companies. And then what we'll do is the theory that I actually learned on a Gros Morne Institute for Sustainable Tourism best practice. We went to Vancouver and Tofino, and what they had done is, as a municipality, and we're going to look at it with the nonprofits, ordered all of the containers for the region in hopes that by doing a bulk order, the price, even though this might be more expensive than styrofoam, by ordering it in a larger bulk order, the price becomes either the same or close to the price of styrofoam. So it makes it easier and affordable to the companies here to transition over to the biodegradable products. So I just wanted to end with that for the takeout containers, because we're really excited about that project and to work with the co-op to hopefully transition the region. And that'll be the biggest shift for the region in, tackling this plastic waste from people and tourism. So the last thing before we open it up for questions is obviously to show you the timeline right now for the next 2 years for this project that's funded from Environment Canada. So the first one we've already done. Thank you, Jackie. And we are lucky enough, because of the funding, to allow Jackie now to work part-time with us while she's doing her thesis to continue the really great work that she's already started. So she's going to be working with us to develop a type of workshop. We're not sure if it's going to be in person or webinar based, that will look at creating a forum for tourism operators and other people in the region to learn either how to get the products or how to help us create things like the Boomerang Bag to have us ready for the spring season to really, put this program to use and reduce our plastic waste. So we'll be also talking with the municipalities about EPR programs and plastic reduction policies in hopes that they might try to implement them in the spring. In the winter, we'll develop how a pilot might look for a reusable refill program with any interested companies. And then look to the work that Jackie again has done on best suited areas for water filter systems to hopefully eliminate plastic water bottles. So people just essentially need to bring their own bottle, or tourism operators, accommodators can offer a refillable bottle as part of their welcome package to coming to Gros Morne. In spring of 2021, we'll roll out everything we'll be hopefully working on hard in the fall and winter and see how it goes. We'll monitor the company's waste and see how much we've reduced it with our programs. And then continue with our beach cleanups and waste audits for not only the communities, but throughout the national park. In the fall of 2021, we'll conduct another workshop to basically show people the report card and how we did for the region. And then, work from there on things we need to improve or adjust to help us, again, reduce that plastic waste. In the winter, we'll complete this program that's funded and just to have an end of report of best practices that, other communities, regions, provinces, or countries could adopt to move towards a full circular economy. And then the project doesn't stop. It always continues. And that's why Ahoy is excited to be here on the ground to either look for more funding or just create different types of groups that can help this run as effectively and efficiently as possible to help us reduce our waste as a whole. And that's where we are so far. So I will leave it there and open it up to the floor to anybody that might have some questions. I can stop sharing now. And yeah, that's it. So I guess.
That's right. Yep. Grenfell campus is trying to do the same thing.
I'll ask a quick question.
Sure.
I see that Darian asked one too by chat. I'll just ask mine verbally and you can decide who's to answer first. I wanted to ask a little bit, I was interested in that part of your timeline about rolling out municipal policies. And forgive me, I might have missed bits and pieces of your presentation, but I'm always very, very interested and very, very curious about relationships between nonprofits and policy-making bodies. And I think there's often lots of really great opportunity there, but also a lot of challenges. So I wonder what sort of process you anticipate or what sort of challenges you anticipate when presumably interacting with municipalities about the possibility of changing policy and how you might see going about that.
Yeah, for sure. I can say first off, we've worked with a bunch of the municipalities for quite some time, me just on a personal level and now as Ahoy. But as we started doing the beach cleanups and showed the municipalities kind of what we're hauling out, they were definitely concerned with what is on the beaches. I can speak to the ones that I've talked to with, the town of Woody Point, Norris Point, bits and pieces with Rocky Harbor and Trout River, that they've already expressed interest. They may not necessarily have the capacity to deal directly with plastic pollution. But, that was the great thing with Jackie is, we've developed a draft policy as, the perfect scenario, not expecting them to take all the pieces of it, but obviously perfect world they would. But another piece that I didn't really chat about is that I also had some summer students that were connected with Ahoy and Gros Morne Cooperating Association. And we developed a survey. So we're currently, through the summer and still now, are doing calls to all the people in the region to just assess what the interest is in, creating policies and programs to reduce plastic waste. And, from those results, and we're waiting to get those results first, because we know as councils, it's really hard to sometimes implement a policy, especially such as this, without the community support. So we're actually looking to see what support we have first from the communities to then show the councils, hey, we've chatted with the people of Gros Morne. They're ready for this. So it shouldn't be too hard to implement the policy. The other piece to that is that Jackie actually looked through the town of North Point's anyway to see what policies they already have in place to then decide, okay, do they have something or not? And if they didn't or did, she then created something that could be easily adopted, but that'll be the next steps. So it's definitely gauging the community support first to bring to the councils. That'll hopefully make them feel more comfortable to adopt this type of policy.
And plus, we've already done, we wrote it all. So all they have to do is just, make it their own. But I guess that's one of the great things that we got to do is have it all there and ready and prepared and just for them to adopt it. But obviously we would just have to work with them to find out how it could be best suitable for them. And, but yeah, so it's looking very promising.
So the next question we have is in the chat here on WebEx, and it is, do you have an idea of the cost comparison between plastic products and the biodegradable ones shown? And is the cost difference paid for by the businesses or the grant money?
Yep, I can touch on that, but I'm sure Jackie can definitely fill it in. That is one part that she did. So we did create an Excel sheet of all of the types of products that we thought the tourism restaurateur operators were using that would have been, plastic based, looking at the prices of those. And then she went through all the different types of biodegradable companies or companies that were offering biodegradable products to look at the prices. So one thing with that is, in the fall, we're actually going to be rolling out just an information sheet for the companies to give us, the company that they might be using, the price that it costs for those types of plastic takeout containers. And then we're going to compare that to the products that we think are the best fit. There is funding, luckily, to subsidize that for the next couple of years to help them transition in a more affordable way. And I do know that the Gros Morne Cooperating Association is helping us support that as well, whether there's more funding down the road. But the goal is to get it to a price that's the same as what they're already paying. And that's the idea behind ordering it in bulk. So if we do that, whether there's subsidies or not, which there is, when those subsidies possibly disappear, they'll be able to continue using those products at the same price that they may have been using for the plastics in the first place.
There's some really, really great questions in here from Liz and from
there's a couple on Facebook too. So I want to give the ones on Facebook. So the first one is, does Ahoy have charitable organizational status?
So it doesn't have the charitable status yet, but it does have its nonprofit status. But in partnership, especially for this program, we're working with the Gros Morne Cooperating Association, which does have both the charitable and the nonprofit status.
Awesome. And then we have one more just on Facebook, is about the refuse part of the 4 Rs. This seems to be putting the emphasis back on the consumer to refuse plastic rather than the businesses not offering in the first place. Is this feasible? Then customers have to specifically ask for plastic items like straws rather than remember to refuse them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, that's the part, most people, I work in this sector, so I have no problem refusing, but if I go out for supper and I have a group with me, I'm the one that's ordering the waters, and then saying, hey, no plastic for the table, no straws for the table. And most people don't want to do that because it's a little bit uncomfortable for some people. So, we put it in there as an option, but, the ultimate goal is to work on projects, policies, and programs that shut the tap off, because I don't want it to be on the onus of the customer, but it is an option if you're really adamant about reducing your plastic use. If you go somewhere, and it doesn't have to be Newfoundland, it could be anywhere, to know that, it's not a bad thing to refuse it. So it's not obviously my first preference, but if you're stuck in a place where they're still using plastic, don't be afraid to refuse.
But also, if you're asked, do you want a plastic bag? All you have to do is just say no. So it's entirely possible. You just have to just be more conscious of it, and then it's very doable.
Awesome.
Is there any more Facebook questions, or should I answer some of these?
Yeah, we can begin with the one that's from Jenna on WebEx here, and it says, how many people in the Gros Morne area have backyard composting or composting available for them in another way that they can properly deal with the biodegradable packaging?
Okay, I'll get you to say that again, and Jackie, I'll just for ease, I'll get Jennifer to stick with the questions, and we'll just be the answerers. Can you say that again, Jennifer?
Yeah, no problem. It's how many people in Gros Morne have backyard composting or composting available to deal with the biodegradable packaging?
Yeah. Okay. So that's a really great question. I don't know, exact numbers, but I can say, of the people that I know in the region, a lot of people, I'd say I'm going to make a very, very rough without any knowledge or research, but there's probably around, I'd say 25%, maybe more, that do backyard composting, but there's even more that have, raised garden beds. And I think it's just the dynamic of living in rural Newfoundland, because I had never seen it growing up in the south coast of Newfoundland, rarely. But this area, there's a lot of people that just love to grow their own vegetables. They do enjoy having their own compost because it feeds their own gardens. But on top of that, there's there's a couple great companies, but there's one that I've worked with outside of Ahoy, which is Gros Morne Farm and Market. And also the social enterprise of the Bombay Old Cottage Hospital that are working on not only sustainable locally grown vegetables, but are interested and looking to work in the future to develop a community composting system. The farm is looking to develop a composting system. So even though there's only a few people doing the backyard composting, which in hopes, we're going to test these products, should be compostable. You should be able to take your Takeout containers and put it in there. But we are working with those two nonprofits and company to develop a bigger version of a composting system, if not just for Norris Point, but perhaps for the region. So that is a step that we are thinking about.
Awesome. And the next question related to COVID-19. So do you anticipate long-term challenges in promoting reusable containers due to COVID-19 public health restrictions, changing corporate policies? Bulk Barn can't accept containers. Restaurants like Tim Hortons can't accept your reusable mugs. It's all understandable, but do you get a sense that those changes will be hard to reverse in the after COVID?
Yeah, for sure. This is a really great question as well. The big thing about that, and when COVID hit, I was kind of in a fluster. We hadn't gotten the funding yet, but I've been campaigning for reduction of plastics reusables for quite some time in this job with Ahoy, but also with the Ecology Action Center. So my biggest first step, and I know science is always coming in and changing, was to see how long does this virus sit on plastics? Is plastics actually sterile, or is it just a misconception because, you see things wrapped in plastic for hospital things? So I did I would say a pretty in-depth study on the amount of science that's still available. And the thing about it is the virus actually sits on plastics longer than it sits on reusables, mainly because we're able to wash our reusables properly. We're able to sterilize them. We're able to bleach them. Cloth materials can be put at a temperature that essentially can, kill the virus. So reusables are actually better health-wise than plastics. So it is definitely a misconception, but obviously in the face of the unknown, the easiest thing companies went to was just saying no reusables. And, it is for the fear of the transmission, obviously, to the person that's serving you and then giving it back. But, with Hospitality and Restaurants Canada, the idea to not accept reusables, say like in Tim Hortons, is only a recommendation. It's not actually a law. So there's companies in, say, Lunenburg, number 9, I think it is, the cafe shop, that even though it's a recommended to not accept reusables, she is. And mainly because if you clean that cup or if you do that extra step, there's just as much chance of getting the virus from a plastic one-use container than getting it from a sterilized, clean coffee cup. So it is a misconception, but we'll be working on ways to kind of debunk that myth and hopefully, encourage companies to be more confident and comfortable to accept reusables. So that now is another component of this program, is to work the reason to help, if not shift everybody to reusables, to, maybe convince some, and just, reduce the fear of that.
Keeping in mind that tourist bags are still going to be banned, so that's still happening.
Boomerang bags, but obviously you can picture in your head being like, oh, that bag's just going to keep going around in the community. There would be, again, for sanitary reasons, but also with the pressures of COVID and being extra safe, there would be a system where you would take that reusable bag that is free, use it, go wherever you want. But when you're done with it, you would actually not put it back on the hook for someone else. You would put it in the dirty box or whatever that would be set up. And then either that business operator or Ahoy or some form of a system will be set up that everybody would always have a clean, reusable bag for no cost. And then, either they can keep it if they're a tourist and they want to keep it because it might be a beautiful bag by Quilter, because we'll continuously be using materials that, would otherwise be wasted, because that's also another sector of waste is materials. But yeah, so we're trying to be very thoughtful about COVID-19 and how that can work to keep everybody safe while also reducing our plastic waste.
Awesome. The next question I have is for Jackie. How do you hope that this experience is going to help you move forward during your environmental policy degree?
I appreciate that. So I am lucky enough that I get to continue on working with this project throughout the fall with Rebecca. And I think it also just kind of solidifies my experience as an environmental policy student, because earlier on in the year, I got to work on a cabinet paper for single-use plastics in Newfoundland. And so it was really great to make that connection there. And then I think that, working with an NGO also gave me a whole nother perspective and just like an understanding of all the different policy actors. And I think this, is invaluable in my experience, and how this is going to be so important for me ever after and after my degree. Thank you for that.
I don't see any other questions, and we're about at 1:30. So I just want to say a big thank you to Rebecca and Jackie for doing this. This is like a very timely topic, especially with COVID and learning about that. And I really appreciate Rebecca sharing that misconception about the virus staying on plastics. That's really helpful to learn. So this video will be recorded and will be uploaded to YouTube later. It's also on Facebook right now. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. It was great to have you guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.